The key had always stuck a little. That was how I knew something was wrong. Irene Calloway, standing on her own front porch with a canvas overnight bag still cutting into my shoulder, knew the resistance of that lock the way you know the weight of your own name. For 27 years, the key had needed a slight lift, a patient twist, a pause no longer than a held breath. Jack used to joke that the house liked to make sure it was really us before letting anyone in. This time the key slid in smoothly, too smoothly. I turned it once. Nothing. I tried again, slower, still nothing. The metal stopped short with a dull, final sound that had no uncertainty in it at all. I pulled the key out and looked at it as if it might explain itself. Same worn teeth. Same small nick near the bow where I'd dropped it in the driveway years ago. I tried the spare from my pocket. The lock didn't even pretend. I stood there longer than I should have, the early afternoon sun warm on my hands, my coat still buttoned. The porch looked exactly as I'd left it 2 days earlier, the faded welcome mat, the spiderweb in the corner I kept meaning to clear, the potted fern Nathan had insisted would freshen things up. Nothing warned me. Nothing announced itself, but the door no longer knew me. I stepped back and noticed the shine. New hardware, polished, modern, the kind Brooke preferred. She always said the old fixtures made the house feel tired. My house. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't raise my voice or call a name that should have answered. Instead, I let my bag slide to the porch floor and sat down on the top step, hands folded, breathing evenly while something quiet and heavy settled into place inside me. So this was how it happened. Not with shouting, not with a fight, but with a locksmith and a decision made while I was gone. I took out my phone and checked it, not with hope, just to confirm what I already knew. No missed calls. No messages, no carefully worded concern, nothing from Nathan, nothing from Brooke. I had told them I'd be back by noon. I stood, picked up my bag, and walked to my car. The engine started on the first turn. That felt ironic. I sat there for a moment, looking at the house from the street, noticing how normal it looked. Curtains drawn, windows closed, peaceful. As if nothing had been taken, as if I hadn't just been erased. I drove away without destination, without tears, without urgency. Shock can do that, it sharpens things instead of dulling them. My thoughts lined up neatly, one behind the other. They thought I would knock. They thought I would call. They thought I would be embarrassed enough to explain myself. They were wrong. I parked 3 blocks away beneath a maple just starting to turn. I sat there, hands on the wheel, and thought not about what they'd done, but about how long it had been possible. The first time Brooke rearranged the kitchen without asking. The first time Nathan said, "She doesn't mean it that way." The first time I moved my things to make room and called it kindness. None of it had been loud. None of it had felt like theft at the time, just adjustments, temporary solutions, small surrenders that were never returned. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and let the truth arrive fully formed. This wasn't sudden. This was practiced. By the time the sun dipped lower, I had already made a decision. Not the kind that comes from anger, but the kind that comes from clarity, the kind you don't announce because it doesn't need permission. I reached for my phone again and scrolled until I found the name I hadn't used in years. Calvin Ross, my attorney, quiet, precise. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke and remembered everything. I didn't call yet. Some things are better handled in the morning. Instead, I leaned back, closed my eyes, and allowed myself one honest thought before the next step revealed itself. They believed the locks ended the story. They had no idea it was just the beginning. I slept in my car that night. Not because I had nowhere else to go. I had friends, a small savings, even a hotel 10 minutes away, but because leaving the neighborhood felt like conceding something I hadn't agreed to give up. I parked beneath the maple and reclined the seat just enough to rest without comfort. The streetlights flickered on one by one, bathing familiar houses in a pale, indifferent glow. No one noticed me. That, too, felt like confirmation. Morning arrived quietly. The world carried on as if no boundary had been crossed. I washed my face at a gas station sink, smoothed my hair with the edge of my hand, and sat in the car long enough to let the stiffness ease from my joints. Age teaches you where patience lives in the body. Mine had settled in my shoulders years ago. At 8:43, I dialed Calvin Ross. He answered on the second ring. "Irene," he said, as if we'd spoken yesterday instead of 3 years ago. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you again." "I need an appointment," I replied. There was a pause, not of hesitation but of recognition. "Come in at 10, he said. "Bring whatever you have." "I will," I said and hung up. I didn't drive back to the house, not yet. I went to a cafe instead, ordered tea, and sat by the window where I could think without interruption. I watched people hurry past with their phones pressed to their ears, moving through lives that assumed permission by default. I wondered how often lines were crossed quietly with paperwork and politeness while everyone else called it progress. Nathan finally texted at 9:12, "Mom, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." I read it once, then again. The word misunderstanding stood out not because it was inaccurate but because it was convenient. It suggested accident, confusion, no one at fault. I didn't respond. Brooke texted an hour later, "We thought this was best for everyone. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." That message, too, received no reply. I finished my tea, paid, and left. Calvin's office looked exactly the same. Same narrow hallway. Same shelf of leather-bound books no one touched anymore. He stood when I entered, his posture straight despite the years that had passed. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "Start wherever you like." So I did. I told him about the lock, the absence of warning, the messages that arrived only after the fact. I told him about the way Brooke had slowly rearranged my life while calling it help, and how Nathan had learned to nod without listening. Calvin didn't interrupt, he never did. When I finished, he folded his hands. "Do you know what authority they believe they're operating under?" "Assumption," I said. "That's not a legal category," he replied gently. "No," I agreed. "It's just the one they're most comfortable with." He opened a file drawer and slid a thin folder onto the desk. "Your deed is still in your name, sole ownership, no trusts, no transfers. No powers of attorney on record." I exhaled slowly. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding that breath. "They changed the locks without your consent," he continued. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's exclusion." "What are my options?" I asked. Calvin looked at me carefully. "The question isn't what you can do, it's what you want to do." I considered that. "I want my house back," I said. "And I want it clear that this will not happen again." He nodded. "Then we proceed quietly, firmly, no spectacle." "That's what I want." "Good," he said. "Because spectacle only benefits people who think attention equals power." When I left his office, the air felt lighter. Not because the situation had changed, but because it had a shape now. Boundaries do that. They turn chaos into geometry. I drove back to the house just after noon. The car was there, Nathan's. Parked neatly in the driveway, exactly where Jack used to leave ours. I didn't slow down. I pulled in, stepped out, and walked to the front door. This time I knocked. Footsteps approached. The door opened a few inches, then stopped. Nathan stood there, eyes widening just slightly. "Mom." "Hello," I said. Behind him, I could see Brooke hovering near the stairs, arms folded, expression already prepared. "We thought you'd call," Nathan said. "I didn't need to," I replied. "You should have told us you were coming back so soon," Brooke added. "I did," I said and waited. The silence stretched. It always did when truth entered a room without softening itself. "We were worried," Nathan said finally. "About you being alone, about the house. It felt like too much for you to manage." "And so you managed it for me," I said. "Without asking." Brooke's lips pressed into a thin line. "We didn't think you'd take it this way." "Of course you didn't," I said calmly. "You didn't think about how I'd take it at all." Nathan shifted. "Let's just talk inside." I shook my head. No, that startled them. People expect resistance to be loud. They don't expect it to be still. "This conversation doesn't require comfort," I continued. "It requires clarity." Brooke laughed once sharply. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being precise." I turned to Nathan. "You let this happen." He opened his mouth, then closed it. That was answer enough. "I'll be returning to the house," I said. "Today, the locks will be changed back. I'll be here when it happens." "You can't just," Brooke began. "I can," I said, "and I will." Nathan ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, please, this is going to turn into a mess." "It already did," I replied. "You just weren't the one locked out." I stepped past them then, not waiting for permission. The house felt different, not unfamiliar, but unsettled, like furniture moved just enough to make you doubt your footing. Brooke followed me into the living room. "You're overreacting." I turned to her. "You mistook my patience for permission." Nathan stood in the doorway, silent. I'll give you time to collect what's yours, I said. We'll schedule it. You won't be rushed, Brooke scoffed. And where exactly are we supposed to go? I met her gaze evenly. That question did not concern you when it was mine. Nathan looked down at the floor. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. The sound grounded me. Some rituals don't belong to anyone else, no matter how hard they try to claim them. From the doorway, Brooke watched me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. You've changed, she said. No, I replied, pouring the water. I've stopped explaining. By evening, the locksmith had come and gone. The familiar resistance returned to the lock just enough to remind me it was real. I stood alone in the entryway after they left, key warm in my palm. The house exhaled. Nathan texted later that night. I didn't think it would go this far. I read it, then set the phone face down. It hadn't gone far. It had finally arrived. The first night back in the house, I slept with the window open. Not wide, just enough to let the air move to remind the walls that I was still listening. The bed felt the same, but I didn't. There was a difference between rest and relief, and what I felt was neither. It was awareness. The kind that comes after something has been taken from you and returned, altered by the knowledge that it could have been taken permanently. Morning arrived without ceremony. I made coffee the way Jack used to like it, stronger than necessary, and stood at the kitchen counter instead of sitting down. I wanted to feel the house while it was awake. The floorboard by the sink creaked in the same place. The clock above the doorway still ran 2 minutes slow. Some things refuse to be modernized no matter how many people try. At 9 o'clock, the phone rang. Nathan. I let it ring once longer than politeness required, then answered. Hi, he said. His voice was careful, like someone approaching an animal that had already bitten once. Good morning, I replied. There was a pause. I didn't sleep much. I slept fine, I said, not to be cruel, just to be accurate. He exhaled. Brooke's upset. I'm sure she is. She feels like you blindsided her. I took my coffee to the table and sat down. That's interesting, I said, because I felt very well prepared when I found myself locked out of my own house. That's not, Nathan, I interrupted gently but firmly. This is not a debate, it's a reckoning. Silence. I need you to understand something, I continued. You didn't make a mistake, you made a choice, and choices have consequences whether or not they were convenient at the time. He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice had shifted. I was trying to keep things from getting worse. For whom? I asked. Another pause, longer this time. I didn't think you'd come back like this, he admitted. Like what? Certain? I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. That's because you haven't seen me be certain in a long time. He sighed. What do you want now? It was the wrong question, but an honest one. I want distance, I said. Not forever, but enough to see what exists without me filling every silence. That sounds like punishment. No, I replied. Punishment requires anger, this requires boundaries. We ended the call without agreement, and for once that didn't bother me. Agreement is often just another word for avoidance. Late that morning, Brooke came by unannounced. I saw her car pull up from the front window. She sat there for a moment before getting out, adjusting something in the mirror, lipstick, maybe her expression. She'd always been good at presenting herself as reasonable. It was one of her talents. I didn't rush to the door. When I did open it, she was already halfway into a speech. This is all unnecessary, she said. We could have talked. We could have, I agreed. You chose not to, she frowned. We didn't think you'd react so strongly. I didn't react, I said. I responded. That's semantics. No, I replied. That's agency. She crossed her arms. You embarrassed us. I studied her face, the controlled irritation, the practiced restraint. You embarrassed yourselves, I said. I simply stopped covering for it. Her voice sharpened. You're acting like a victim. I'm acting like a homeowner, I said evenly, and like a woman who knows when she's being managed instead of respected. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're blowing this out of proportion? Am I asked. Tell me when you plan to give me my keys back. She hesitated. That was answer enough. I didn't raise Nathan to outsource his conscience, I continued. But you've made it very easy for him to do so. That's unfair. Truth often feels that way, I said. She looked past me into the house as if measuring what she'd lost access to. So what now? Are you cutting us off? Freezing us out? I stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in, I said. Let's not do this on the porch. She blinked, surprised. Inside, she sat on the edge of the chair, posture rigid. I took my time pouring tea. Silence does more work than confrontation ever could. I'm not cutting anyone off, I said finally. I'm restructuring. Restructuring what? My life, I said, and my estate. That got her attention. I met with Calvin Ross yesterday, I added casually, her eyes flicked up. Your lawyer, yes. What for? So that my future isn't decided by whoever speaks loudest in my absence. She straightened. Nathan didn't mean any harm. Harm doesn't require intent, I said. It requires impact. She stood abruptly. You're making this adversarial. No, I replied. You made it adversarial when you changed the locks. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed unsure which strategy to use. I think you should leave, I said. She stared at me. You're serious? I've never been more so. She left without another word. That afternoon, I walked through the house slowly, not to clean or fix, but to notice. Which rooms felt like mine again, which still carried the echo of intrusion. Reclaiming space isn't about ownership, it's about presence. In the den, I found one of Jack's old notebooks tucked behind a stack of magazines Brooke had left. I sat down and opened it. His handwriting filled the pages, lists, half-finished thoughts, reminders to fix things he never got around to fixing. One line, underlined twice, caught my eye. If you don't decide how you'll be treated, someone else will. I closed the notebook and rested my hand on the cover. Jack had always seen things before I was ready to. The next day, Calvin called. I've drafted the initial revisions, he said. No drama, no declarations. Just clarity. That's exactly what I want, I replied. We'll need to formalize your wishes in writing, he continued. And I recommend adjusting access, financial and otherwise. Do it, I said. There was a pause. You're very calm? I waited a long time to be, I said. That evening, Nathan texted again. Brooke says you won't talk to her. I typed, then deleted several responses before sending one sentence. I'm done explaining myself to people who weren't listening. No reply came. Before bed, I stood in the hallway and looked at the front door. The lock caught the light, solid and unremarkable. It didn't promise safety. It simply did its job. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. Somewhere between the sound of the house settling and the quiet hum of the street outside, I understood something I hadn't before. Power doesn't announce itself when it arrives. It settles in quietly once you stop giving it away. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, cream-colored, thick, heavy in the hand in a way that had nothing to do with paper and everything to do with consequence. I set it on the table and left it there for nearly an hour. There was a time in my life when mail like that would have made my chest tighten. Bank statements, legal notices, anything official enough to suggest loss instead of control. That instinct doesn't disappear overnight. It just learns new rules. Now I let myself feel the hesitation without obeying it. When I finally opened the envelope, I did it slowly. Calvin Ross had done exactly what he promised. No threats, no dramatics, just language precise enough to remove confusion from the equation. Revised will, updated power of attorney, clear limits, clear permissions, nothing left implied. I read every page. Not because I didn't trust him, but because this was the first time in a long while that every sentence applied to me. Not to who someone thought I was, not to what was convenient for the family narrative, but to the woman who woke up in this house every morning and paid attention. By the time I finished, the house had gone quiet in that deep midday way, no cars passing, no neighbors moving about. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum more softly, as if it too understood something had changed. I signed where I was meant to sign, then I sat there with the pen still in my hand and felt it. Not triumph, not relief, finality. That afternoon I drove to the bank. The teller knew my name, she always had. We exchanged pleasantries that didn't ask for anything deeper, and I appreciated that. People underestimate the comfort of being known without being examined. The changes took longer than I expected. Accounts disentangled. Authorizations revoked, new instructions put in place. Each step felt surgical, careful, irreversible. Are you sure? The teller asked gently at one point. Yes, I said without hesitation. She nodded and continued. By the time I left, the sky had shifted into that pale, washed-out blue that comes before rain. I sat in the car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, and realized something quietly unsettling. No one had called, not Nathan. Not Brooke. I hadn't expected them to, but noticing the absence still mattered. It confirmed what I already knew, that urgency only existed when I was useful. At home, I found a box by the back door. Brooke's handwriting marked the side in neat, deliberate letters. Kitchen, Misk. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made tea and carried it into the den where Jack's chair still sat by the window. I hadn't moved it. I didn't plan to. Some spaces don't need to be reclaimed because they were never truly taken. I sat there for a long time, watching the light shift across the floor, thinking about how often I had mistaken accommodation for love. Eventually, I opened the box. Inside were things that had once belonged in my kitchen but had been quietly removed. My old serving spoon, the chipped blue bowl I used for bread dough, a stack of napkins I'd sewn myself decades ago. Useful things, personal things, things that had been deemed unnecessary without my input. I didn't feel anger. I felt confirmation. I put each item back where it belonged. That evening, Nathan finally called. His name lit up on the screen, and for a moment I simply watched it ring. Then I answered. "Mom," he said, his voice was subdued. "We need to talk?" "We've been talking," I replied. "Just not the way you're used to." "That's not fair." "No," I said calmly, "it's accurate." He exhaled. "Brooke's having a hard time." I waited. "You're changing things without us," he continued. "Yes, you're shutting us out." "No," I said, "I'm stepping back." "That feels the same." "It isn't," I replied. "You're just not used to not being centered." Silence stretched between us, not hostile, uncomfortable. "I didn't realize how serious this was," he said finally. "I did," I replied. "That's the difference." He sounded tired then. "I don't know how to fix this." "That's because this isn't something you fix," I said. "It's something you sit with." Another pause. "I feel like I'm losing you," he admitted. I closed my eyes briefly. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You stopped noticing where I was." The call ended without resolution, and for the first time I didn't feel the urge to follow it with reassurance. That night rain came, soft at first, then steady. I left the window open and listened to it fall against the roof, the rhythm familiar and grounding. Jack used to say rain made the house feel honest, no pretending, no performance, just shelter doing what it was built to do. Before bed, I took out the old photo album from the hall closet. Not to reminisce, to remember accurately. There was a picture of Nathan at 6, missing 2 teeth, standing in the yard holding a kite string with absolute confidence that the sky would cooperate. Another of him at 14, sulking in the doorway, already practicing distance. Another at 30, wedding suit slightly too tight, smiling the smile people wear when they think they've arrived somewhere permanent. I closed the album. Love doesn't disappear all at once, it erodes when attention does. The next morning, Brooke sent an email. Long, polite, carefully worded. She spoke of misunderstandings, of stress, of intentions that had been good even if execution hadn't been perfect. She suggested a reset, a conversation, a clean slate. I read it twice. Then I archived it without responding, not because I was punishing her. Because clarity doesn't negotiate with revisionism. Later that day, Calvin called to confirm everything had been filed. "You're protected," he said simply. "Good," I replied. There was a pause. "You sound lighter." "I am," I said. I stopped carrying what wasn't mine. That evening I cooked dinner just for myself. Nothing elaborate, soup, bread, a piece of fruit. I ate slowly without distraction, without the sense that someone might comment on the smell or the time or the choice itself. Afterward, I washed the dishes and left them to dry exactly where I wanted them. As I turned off the lights, I felt it again, not loneliness, not triumph, but something steadier. Ownership, not just of the house, of my time, of my silence, of what came next. And for the first time since the lock had been changed, the quiet didn't feel like something waiting to be broken. It felt like something that belonged to me. Nathan arrived the following Sunday. He was early, by 12 minutes, which told me more than his expression ever could. People arrive early when they're anxious to be seen as respectful, when they want credit before they've done the work. I didn't rush to the door. I finished drying my hands, folded the towel, and set it back where it belonged. Only then did I walk down the hallway and open it. He stood on the porch alone, no Brooke, no rehearsed smile. "Hi, Mom," he said, shifting his weight. "I thought we could talk." I stepped aside. "You can come in." I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask how he was. Those habits belong to a version of me that no longer runs the room. He sat on the edge of the armchair, not the couch, as if unsure of how much space he was allowed to take. I noticed that too. I don't want this to turn into a fight, he began. It won't, I said. I don't argue anymore. That gave him pause. I didn't realize how far things had gone, he continued. With the locks, with everything. You realized, I said calmly. You just assumed I'd absorb it. He frowned. That's not fair. No, I replied. It's accurate. He looked down at his hands. They were clenched the way they used to be when he was a boy caught between guilt and defiance. Brooke feels terrible, he said. I waited. She didn't mean to overstep. She planned it, I said. Planning isn't accidental. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then sighed. She thought you'd stay with friends longer. And if I had, I asked, would that have made it acceptable? Silence. I let it stretch, not to punish him, to let the truth finish speaking. I didn't raise you to mistake convenience for permission, I said quietly. But somewhere along the way you learned too. He shifted in his seat. I was trying to keep the peace. No, I said, you were outsourcing discomfort. That landed harder than I expected. He leaned back, eyes glassy but focused. I don't want to lose you, he said. I'm not lost, I replied. I'm just no longer available for erasure. He swallowed. What do you want from me? There it was. The question people ask when they've never considered presence unless it comes with instructions. I want consistency, I said. Not urgency, not guilt-driven gestures. I want to know that if you show up, it's because you mean to, not because something slipped. He nodded slowly. And Brooke, she decides who she is without my compliance, I said. That's not my work. He looked around the room as if noticing it for the first time, the placement of things, the way nothing had been rearranged to accommodate him. You changed, he said quietly. I stopped shrinking, I corrected. He didn't argue. When he stood to leave, he hesitated by the door. Can I come back next week? I considered it, not emotionally, practically. Yes, I said. But not to fix anything, just to be here. He nodded. I can do that. We'll see, I replied gently. After he left, the house felt steady again, not relieved, not rattled, just mine. That evening, Brooke sent a text. I hope we can reset. I never wanted things to feel hostile. I read it once. Then I turned the phone face down. Hostility suggests conflict. This wasn't conflict. This was correction. Later, I took out Jack's old notebook, the one he used to keep folded grocery lists and half-written thoughts in. On the last page, in his uneven handwriting, was a line I'd never noticed before. Silence doesn't mean agreement. It just means patience ran out. I smiled at that. The next morning, I walked through the house with intention, not cleaning, not rearranging, just acknowledging. Each room held its shape now without negotiation. The kitchen smelled like bread. The den held light the way it always had in autumn. Even the hallway felt less narrow. In the afternoon, Calvin called to check in. No new developments, he said, which is good. Yes, I replied. It is. You holding up all right? I am, I said honestly. I stopped explaining myself. He chuckled softly. That tends to free up a lot of energy. That night I slept deeply. No dreams, no rehearsals, just rest. And for the first time in a long while, I understood something clearly. People don't resist your boundaries because they're cruel. They resist them because they were benefiting from your absence. That realization didn't harden me, it steadied me. And whatever came next, reconciliation or distance or something in between, I knew one thing without question. I would not unlock any door again just because someone knocked loudly enough. The first thing that changed was not the house. It was Nathan. He grew careful in a way that wasn't thoughtful, just alert. Like someone who senses a change in the weather but doesn't know whether to bring an umbrella or run for cover. He watched me more closely, listened longer when I spoke, flinched slightly when I didn't. Brooke noticed too. She masked it better, but I saw the recalculations happening behind her eyes. The way she paused before making decisions that used to be automatic. The way she checked with Nathan before moving something that had once been considered mine by default. Silence had begun to work against them. They didn't know why. That morning, I made breakfast exactly the way I used to: eggs, toast, the kettle whistling just loud enough to claim the room. Brooke didn't comment. She glanced at the stove, then away. Nathan sat, hands wrapped around his mug, waiting for something. I didn't give it to him. After breakfast, I gathered my papers from the drawer Brooke had labeled household documents without ever asking whose household she meant. I didn't rush, I didn't hide it. Nathan watched me from the doorway. Are you reorganizing? He asked. No, I said, I'm retrieving. That word landed heavier than I intended. He nodded anyway. Later that afternoon, Agnes came by. She didn't knock softly, she never had. Her presence filled rooms in a way that felt earned, not invasive. Brooke stiffened when she saw her, the way people do when someone enters who doesn't require permission. You look better, Agnes said to me, scanning my face like a ledger. Sharper. I feel steadier. Good, she replied. That's usually the stage right before people get uncomfortable. Brooke offered coffee. Agnes declined and sat at the table instead. So, Agnes said, folding her hands, how long have you two been making decisions without Irene? Nathan shifted. We're just trying to help. Agnes tilted her head. Funny how help always seems to come with control. Brooke smiled thinly. We're keeping things practical. Agnes laughed once, short and humorless. Practical for whom? The room went still. I said nothing. Agnes didn't wait for answers. She never did, she turned to me instead. You ready? Yes. Nathan frowned. Ready for what? I stood. For things to be clear. Brooke crossed her arms. If this is about the paperwork again, it is, I said calmly. But not the way you think. That evening after Agnes left, Nathan followed me into the living room. You're scaring Brooke, he said quietly. I sat down. That isn't my responsibility. He hesitated. You're acting different? I am different, I replied, because I stopped assuming silence was kindness. He looked down at the floor. We're family? Yes, I said, which is why this matters. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. I recognized that habit. He'd been doing it since childhood, swallowing discomfort instead of dealing with it. 2 days later, Calvin Ross sent the documents. They were unremarkable in appearance. Clean, clear, no unnecessary language. Authority expressed through structure, not threat. I read them twice before signing anything. Then I invited Nathan and Brooke to sit with me at the table. Brooke arrived guarded. Nathan looked tired. This isn't a fight, I said before either of them could speak. It's a correction. Brooke exhaled sharply. Irene, I'm reclaiming legal authority over my property, my finances, and my decisions, I continued. You will no longer act on my behalf without my explicit consent. Nathan blinked. You think we were? Yes, I said gently. You were. The word hung there. Calvin's name was printed neatly at the bottom of the page. That was when Brooke's expression changed. You spoke to a lawyer, she said. I did. Without emotion, without apology, Brooke leaned back. This feels extreme. No, I replied. What happened before was extreme. This is proportionate. Nathan rubbed his face. Why didn't you just say something sooner? I met his eyes. I was watching who you became when you thought I wouldn't. That hurt him, I could tell, but truth often does. Brooke stood. So what now? Now, I said, we live honestly. She laughed softly. That's vague. It's precise, I replied. You'll ask before you act, you'll stop managing what isn't yours, and you'll accept that I am not temporary. Silence followed. Nathan finally spoke. Are you pushing us out? I considered the question. No, I said, I'm removing myself from the margins. That night, Brooke barely spoke. Nathan sat awake long after I went to bed. I slept deeply. The house felt different the next morning, not peaceful, aligned. Brooke no longer rearranged. Nathan no longer assumed. Conversations slowed, careful now, shaped by awareness. Agnes called that evening. They're rattled, she said, pleased. They're adjusting. You did good, Agnes added. You didn't yell, you didn't plead, you let structure do the work. That was the point. You know what comes next, she said. Yes, I replied. They decide whether they can live with a woman who remembers herself. And if they can't, I looked around the house, the walls, the quiet, the space I had reclaimed without raising my voice. Then I will, we ended the call. I stood at the window afterward, watching the light fade across the yard. For the first time in a long while, nothing felt borrowed, not the space, not the silence, not my place within it. And I knew, without doubt, that whatever came next would arrive on terms I had finally set myself. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It came in pieces. In the way Brooke began asking before moving anything. In the way Nathan stopped speaking for me when visitors asked questions. In the way the house no longer felt like a negotiation disguised as family. They were adjusting, not because they agreed with me, but because they had to. Power once reclaimed does not need to announce itself. It simply refuses to yield. That week, Calvin Ross followed through with precision. Documents were filed, copies were sent, notifications delivered without drama. He didn't warn. He didn't threaten, he corrected. When Nathan opened the envelope addressed to him, his hands trembled just slightly. "I didn't realize how far this had gone," he said later, standing in the hallway with the papers folded too tightly. "It didn't go far," I replied. "It went exact." Brooke read hers twice, then a third time. She didn't argue that was new. Instead, she said, "So this is permanent?" "Yes," her mouth tightened. "You don't trust us?" I met her gaze calmly. "Trust is built on restraint. You didn't practice it." She looked away. Nathan tried to soften it. "We thought we were helping." "I know," I said. "That's why it was dangerous." That night I heard them talking behind their bedroom door. Low voices, tense pauses. I didn't listen closely. I didn't need to anymore. Agnes came over on Thursday. She brought no food, no comfort, no unnecessary sympathy, just herself and a sharp assessment. "Well," she said, settling into the chair by the window, "they're quiet. They're thinking." "That's worse for people like Brooke," Agnes replied. "Thinking requires accountability." I smiled faintly. Agnes leaned forward. "Are you ready if they leave?" The question didn't startle me. "Yes," she nodded once. "Good, because they might." "I know." That evening, Brooke knocked on my door. Not tapped, not assumed, knocked. "Irene," she said, measured, "we need to talk." I gestured for her to sit. She didn't. "I didn't expect this," she began. "I thought things would settle." "They have," I said. "Just not in your favor," she inhaled. "That sounds cruel." "No," I replied. "It sounds accurate." Nathan appeared in the doorway. "Brooke." "No," she said. "I want to finish." She turned back to me. "I didn't mean to erase you." "I know," I said again. "You meant to manage me." Her eyes flashed. "I was trying to make a home. At my expense." Silence. Nathan finally spoke. "What do you want from us now?" I folded my hands. "Respect or distance, you choose." Brooke's voice dropped. "Those aren't equal options." "They are to me." She stared at the floor. Nathan looked exhausted. "If we stay, things won't go back." "No," I said, "they won't." Another pause. Brooke straightened. "Then maybe we shouldn't." There it was. I nodded. "Then we'll plan it properly." She blinked. "You're okay with this?" "I am prepared for it." That unsettled her more than anger ever could have. They moved quietly, not rushed, not dramatic, no slammed doors or accusations. Just boxes, schedules, logistics, the language Brooke understood best. Nathan tried once more. "Irene," he said, standing by the door with a box in his hands. "You don't have to be alone." I looked at him steadily. "I was alone long before you noticed." He swallowed. On the last morning, Brooke walked through the house slowly. She touched the counter, the doorway, the light switch. She looked almost uncertain. "I didn't think you'd let this happen," she admitted. "I didn't let it," I replied. "I allowed it to stop." They left before noon. No hugs, no speeches, just absence. The house exhaled. Agnes arrived an hour later and surveyed the quiet. "Well," she said, "that's done." "Yes," she smiled. "You didn't lose anything?" "No," I said. "I clarified." Calvin called that afternoon. "Everything is finalized," he said. "You're protected." "Thank you. You handled this well," he added. "Most people wait until they're cornered." "I stopped stepping backward," I replied. That night I made tea and sat in the living room alone. Not lonely, aligned. The silence didn't echo, it settled. I thought about Nathan, the boy he was, the man he chose to become. I wished him clarity, nothing more. I thought about Brooke, her need to control, her fear of anything unmanageable. I released it. I thought about myself. About how many years I had mistaken endurance for grace. That mistake was over. Agnes called before bed. "So," she said, "how does it feel?" I looked around the room, the furniture untouched, the space intact. My name still written into every corner of the house. "It feels like mine again," I said. She laughed softly. "Good, don't give it back." "I won't." When I turned off the light that night, I did so without rehearsing explanations. Without waiting, without bracing. Some endings are loud, this one was not, it was precise, and it held.